What personal characteristics do you bring to the job? What jobs have you held in the past that you feel helped shape your bid for the 1st Congressional District?
I've had a long career of public service. I haven't been a career politician again. I went to Ole Miss, the business and law schools, received degrees there, eventually went into the Navy. The U.S. Navy, served on active duty as a Navy JAG officer for 3.5 years in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and then in Naval Air Station Meridian, Mississippi. When I came off of active duty, I stayed in the Naval Reserve, and after 21 years retired in 2005 at the rank of commander. I'm the only military veteran, by the way, running in this race on either major party ticket. I have served as an assistant district attorney for several years in the district down there in Eupora, where Eupora is, and that's 7 counties. And by the way, when I was doing that, we only had the district attorney and myself. We didn't have the staff back then that they have now. So we had it to ourselves, basically doing prosecuting in the 7 counties, and that was a lot of fun. Kind of circuit riders back then doing that. But I did that, went on to serve as a circuit judge down in the same district, served as mayor of Eupora, and then I served in the Bush administration in the Environment and Natural Resources Division towards the end of George W. Bush's 2nd term. I was a Bush appointee there in the Justice Department. These are experiences I've had, Robert, at the local, the state, and the national levels. Nobody else in this race has served at all of these levels. I've seen quite a bit of government service. I've seen how government affects people at all levels. And I've also been privileged to go to Washington and see how things work up there. These experiences, I believe, have prepared me quite well to serve in the U.S. Congress, to take these experiences to Congress and apply them to everyday lives of Americans through the legislation that will come forth. Personal characteristics of mine: I'm a born-again Christian. I'm a strong believer. I believe we need to get back to biblical values. We need to get back to the Constitution. I'm try to emphasize in life honesty and integrity. Try to be affable and friendly to everyone. Very persistent, determined, persuasive. I think those are characteristics. And conviction and principle. That's another very important one. People that go to Washington that really aren't convicted about what they believe, they can be swayed and moved in any direction. I come from a very conservative viewpoint. It hadn't changed during a lifetime. It will be firm in Washington. Some of the things I've done too, by the way, that I think would be of interest, Robert. I've always been conservative. I've advocated conservative views. When I went to law school, I began to study constitutional law. And during that period, and as I studied that, I came to realize the U.S. Supreme Court, over the last 50-plus years, and this was back in the 70s and 80s at that time, and since then, they have veered far away from what the Constitution had in mind, how the Constitution was written, how things should be governed. The court began to make up their own laws and decisions. They didn't really follow the Constitution. And they began to veer from that in really a significant way in the 50s and then the 60s and on to today. And we need to get back to constitutional government. And as you've heard in my speeches, I am a strong advocate of getting back to God-centered, limited constitutional government. If we'll do that and go back to what the founders had in mind, this drift towards liberalism and socialism we've seen, now a run towards it, began over 50 years ago with the school prayer case in 1962, where they kicked prayer out of public schools, and then the Great Society that came on in 65 in those years. Now just a run to socialism. We need to get away from that and get back to what the founders had in mind, and we can get America going again. We can get America back to the place where it continues the march to greatness. The America that everybody, I believe, wanted to see when they were growing up, and they want their children to have.
Boy, I started working when I was 14 years old. First of all, I love Mississippi. Grew up in Lafayette County. As I told you, my parents worked around here, and my mother was born in DeSoto County, in Hernando. After graduating from college, I went to Washington, D.C. I worked during the 104th Congress, where we had our greatest times, where you had a true contract with America, where President Clinton signed 70% of that. I worked on Ways and Means issues, where we had the capital gains tax cut. Also, where we had the $500 per child tax credit. We had welfare reform. We need to revisit that. Those are issues that are passionate to me. We worked on the Social Security Trust Fund and issues regarding that. After working on the Ways and Means Committee and working for Bob Dole on policy papers to eliminate, and we looked at eliminating education, the Commerce Department, we looked at HUD, even we looked at several departments, but I worked on that for about a year. After that, I became a political strategist, government affairs advocate, and I opened up my own small business, a consulting firm in Washington, D.C. So I'm a small business owner. Also, for 12 years, I served as a political strategist on a news channel, a national news channel, where I actually got to sit down with members of Congress, debate members of Congress. I know how the process works. And listen, this problem is not because of the Obama administration. It's not because of the Bush administration. It's not because of just Republicans or Democrats. It's all of the above. It's a system that has been abused. I know how to get things done because I've worked on both sides of the aisle, as a legislative aide and as a political strategist, or some people might say as a lobbyist. I have worked on both sides where I know how you can get things through the Congress without selling our country to get things through.
I started work in the 8th grade and have worked summers, Christmases, ever since. Right out of college, I went to work with a relatively small Mississippi life insurance company. And that company grew, and I grew with it. I lived for about 6 years in Middle and East Tennessee and took our company, pioneered our growth in Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, and then they transferred me back to North Mississippi. So I think I had about 30 sales reps working with me on a regular basis as part of that job. Came back to North Mississippi in 1992, and in 1994, that company went through a merger and takeover, and I lost my job. I don't have to pretend to understand what the thousands of people throughout North Mississippi are dealing with in some difficult unemployment times, because I've been there. My wife and I have made some very, very difficult decisions. I started a new business from the ground up in 1996. And so I know what it's like to start up a business. I know what it's like to make payroll. I know what it's like to have to borrow money on Friday. I know what it's like to pay all the employees and put my paycheck in my pocket and not cash it until Wednesday of next week because the money's not in the bank. The reason I think that business experience is important is because the most pressing need we have in North Mississippi today is jobs. And we need somebody that understands how to grow businesses, how to start businesses, and how to create jobs. In addition, I have taken the first 3 months every year to go to Jackson to represent the people of Lee and Pontotoc County in the state Senate. That's been one of the highest honors of my life. I've learned how to work with other people in the legislative process. I've learned that it's one thing to talk about conservative values. It's something completely different to translate those conservative values into conservative public policy. And the things that a lot of candidates are talking about doing in Washington, I've done in Jackson. And I'm proud of my track record on cutting taxes. I voted to cut taxes over 150 times and seen that effect, the effect that those votes have had on economic growth. In the most difficult budget years since the Great Depression, I've had to make the difficult decisions to cut spending in state government. We've made those decisions in Mississippi. They are not making those decisions in Washington, and I think that the people of Mississippi want somebody in Washington that will make those decisions. I've been the voice for life. Numerous times I have advanced legislation on the floor of the state Senate that has made Mississippi recognized as the safest state in the nation for unborn children. As recently as yesterday, Governor Barbour signed into law a bill that I introduced and got passed through the Senate and the House that would make sure that any health care plan offered through Obamacare does not use any dollars to cover abortions for children in Mississippi. So I think that experience in translating conservative values into conservative public policy is an asset in representing the people of North Mississippi.